Though Johann VI had just been coronated as king, he was in his mid-50s and had no heir. It was clear that his reign would not stretch to the likes of his predecessor Johann Cicero, who was coronated at the age of 15. Despite Johann VI having over 7 children, all died in their infancy and succession was very unclear. Johann would eventually have a child named Frederick before his death, but for now, the Hohenzollern nobles were worried that the Habsburgs of Austria could usurp the Prussian throne. Ever since the state of Prussia was formed, the realm's nobles found their influence on the decline, and Johann's hungry eyes did not overlook this. Thus, in early July 1533, Johann issued a decree forming the Prussian Landtag, a relatively new concept in Europe where various nobles from across the nation would be granted seats in a parliament, and would hold debates to vote on legislation. Johann had curtailed the significant influence that the nobility had over the crown, and divided them into 2 groups: parliamentary representatives, which would still hold some power in the government, and those who were integrated into the royal house and were forced to give up their lands to the crown. During this radical shift in government, the state of Prussia was involved in an offensive conflict with their ally, the Austrians, in a Holy Roman intervention in southern Germany. But this conflict would become very irrelevant in the light of an Ottoman war declaration against the Habsburgs. Despite the Sultan's alliance with Prussia, he wanted to expel Austrian influence from the Balkans. Johann found his nation in a position similar to his predecessor Johann Cicero, who defended a doomed ally, the Burgundians, against an overwhelmingly superior enemy. Despite the odds, and Johann knowing that an Austrian victory was impossible, he kinda wanted to send his army on a vacation. He wouldn't be there to enjoy it though, as, on February 5th, 1535, Johann VI died, a little less than 5 years after his uncle, Johann Cicero's death. His son Frederick was just 3 years old. Again, similar to Johann Cicero when his father died while he was just 4. Johann's wife, Joanna, would become the regent of Prussia for 12 years until Frederick was of age. Joanna stationed her armies in the Austrian Alps and sent off her soldiers skiing down the mountain slopes, while also besieging a captured Austrian fort. Though her army's distraction would backfire when an Ottoman force of 36,000 soldiers went to relieve the siege. The Prussians were out of position and caught by the numerically superior Turks. The Prussian army attempted to resist, but was inevitably forced to retreat. And while the Prussian army returned home, a Calvinist band of 17,000 heretics was at the walls of Berlin, though they were quickly defeated and Berlin was relieved. Back in the south, the Turks were at the walls of Vienna, and the city fell to the Sultan's forces in September 1537. Now, the Sultan pushed into Prussian Silesia, though Joanna's army was now divided due to the English's blind intervention on the side of the Sultan. Calais was besieged, and only 23,000 men were back in Prussia. The conflict ended in November 1537, with the Austrians agreeing to the Sultan's humiliating demands, including Vienna being plundered by the Ottomans. But now, the conflict came to a close and left 300,000 men dead. Just 3 months after the crushing defeat at the hands of the Turks, Joanna called for the Third Western Expedition against the city of Magdeburg. 5 other states would join Magdeburg's defense, 2 allies and 3 trade league partners. And while not needing any military assistance, Joanna called on Prussia's ally to the east to join the campaign. Prussian engineering was strong and put Magdeburg and the trade city of Lübeck to siege. The architects of the Prussian army had put forth new approaches to modern firearms, which were revolutionizing the way battles were fought across Europe. In March 1539, Joanna demanded that the state of Bremen adopt Protestantism as part of the peace treaty. This would start a trend among her and her son's future conquests, which would rapidly spread Protestantism in Germany. And in February 1540, Magdeburg was annexed in the third victory on the Western Front. And yes, in the last Prussia video, I did confuse East and West the entire time. Just a year later, Joanna wanted to avenge the Prussians after the Dutch revolt. The Dutch had formed a defensive alliance with both the Bohemians and the English, both fearing Prussia's aggression. This did not stop the Prussian army though. Prague was put to siege, and the Prussian army in Burgundy navigated their way throughout the heavily fortified Dutch lowlands. The English had sought out a military alliance with the Dutch, seeking to counter their rival in Prussia, but the English army was incompetent, and left their armies defeated at every major attempt the English made on landing on the continent. Once more, Joanna called for Poland to join the war, and the Hussars answered, moving to siege Utrecht and Amsterdam. The Dutch attempted a valiant resistance against Prussia, but of course, they were no match for the Prussian army. Bohemia was forced out of the war, and in September 1542, the English fortress of Calais on the continent fell to the Prussians. While the war raged on, an imperial diet convened on the matter of the peasants' war attempted to reconcile with the peasantry, slightly weakening nobles throughout the empire. In August 1543, after just one failed attempt, Amsterdam fell to the Polish army. The city was transferred to Prussian occupation, and the Dutch government was expelled to London. Despite this, the combined Anglo-Dutch forces continued their efforts to land on the continent, but were defeated several times. Most notably in the Battle of Stade and the subsequent Battle of Verdun, where a force of 17,000 English soldiers were killed or captured by the Prussians. The Anglo-Dutch alliance had suffered twice the casualties that the Prussians and Poles had, but the Prussians continued to burn the lowlands. On December 4th, 1544, having been expelled from their continental holdings, the English agreed to pay the Prussians a sum of wealth in exchange for peace, and 6 days later, it was now the Dutch at the table. The Dutch saw the loss of territory in Belgium, as well as monetary and trade concessions, but the most notable term of the peace would be the Dutch conceding the city of Amsterdam to the Prussians. The great trade city was now in the hands of Prussia, and in a few years, Joanna would declare it as the main trade city of Prussia. The merchants of Prussia flocked to Amsterdam, and the Prussian presence in the English Channel was now indisputable. What followed the glorious victory over the Dutch was a short period of peace. The Prussian navy and armies were expanded with the growth of the state. During this time, the French, who were previously under Spanish rule, had launched a rebellion aided by the Austrians. The English had refused to join in the defense of the Spanish during the French War of Independence, breaking up the previously unstoppable Western Alliance bloc. A few years later, in June 1548, Joanna gave up her position as the regent of Prussia, and her son Frederick was crowned on his 15th birthday. Frederick was a bright child, having received the best tutors Germany had to offer, and Frederick himself fell in love with three things: military, war, and religion. His love of religion would show in his future military expeditions, which he wasted no time in organizing. Just 4 months after his coronation, he declared war on the state of Munster in what would become the Fourth Western Expedition. This time, Frederick faced 8 opponents, of which all were in the HRE except Riga. But despite the numbers, Frederick had carefully calculated this war. He intended to force many of the small city-states that had united against him to convert to Protestantism in peace treaties, spreading the religion across Germany. While Frederick had not intended to call upon his Polish allies, wanting to show that he could win wars alone, he reluctantly accepted the advice of his war council and did so. The war was no challenge, and many states in the HRE were forced to convert to Protestantism at the hands of Frederick's zealotry. Now he negotiated with Munster alone, and subjugated the Rum state as it had been driven out of its mainland from the other Westphalian states. Hey, you probably noticed that this video is shorter than usual, and if you're wondering why, it's because I believe people would prefer shorter, more frequent parts rather than longer, less frequent parts. Do you agree? Please tell me what you think in the comments.